Hey folks, this is Rabble Rousing Rich Bergeron.
The Tornado, Tony Pennicott.
And Psychic Tom Paget, crystal ball ready to go.
Alright, well, we had the biggest fights of last weekend were pretty disappointing. And turns out, actually, there's quite a bit of controversy, despite the fact that it's not really over people bitching about the fact that they spent too much money on the show. But it's really surrounding this Triller company, because they made it out like all these bouts were professional bouts, and turns out none of them were, except for the one boxing match that was the title eliminator, which turned out to be a garbage decision according to all the experts. Jono, Carroll, and Benavidez there. It's the only real boxing match on the whole card, and then Tito Ortiz, he deleted his tweets, but after the fight said that it was illegal punches that knocked him out. It was just a bunch of crazy stuff. But anyway, Evander Holyfield was really the talk of the town. Just talking about basically how it was a ridiculous idea to even put him in there. They shouldn't have licensed him. It was a disgrace. This, that, and the other thing. I don't think he looked that bad. I mean, he was conscious. He was talking fine afterwards.
He was talking fine.
They ended it quick.
The man looked like he was... The man looked like his legs were that of a baby fawn.
Yeah. But, I mean,
right,
just...
I didn't watch it live, and they're like, well, it's not for the first round. And I was like, so the next day I YouTubed it, and I was like, his legs look like, it was like a newborn fawn that can't steady himself.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because as soon as before it landed, I think it was like a big jab to the chest or something, and Evander just felt, he didn't fall, but he was just shoved back, and I mean, he's taking punches from the best and not reacted like that. His leg, what do they say about old fighters? The legs are gone. His balance was off. I mean, I don't think he was hurt. But I'm not going to argue. But I'm not going to argue that stoppage, because I just see anything coming back. And the referee can only take put up with so much, and it just sad. But again, Tony, like you were saying before, one guy is still undefeated, and that's old man Adrian. And this is, I guess everyone did kind of see it coming, but you never know for sure. That was the interesting part of that. Now, I understand he didn't look good in training, but Evander Holyfield, if you figure he still has a punch, I don't care if he's 70, 80. He's going to have that punch, but the balance of the legs just wasn't. And Vitor, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying, when we were talking last week, even Evander back in the 90s, he'd fight where he would look completely shot. Then he'd look like a murderer the next fight. Like, he had that first fight with Michael Moore, and he looked, he looked real old. Yeah. And then he retired because of a heart issue. He came back, didn't look good against Bobby Chen. Had the third fight with Riddick Bowe, and, and knocked out, and it was like, he needs to retire. Next thing you know, he has a great fight with Ray Mercer, comes back, knocks out Mike Tyson, and he destroys Moore in the rematch. Then the first fight with Lewis, lethargic. Second fight with Lewis, looked good, and it was like, it was almost exact. So, but in the fight that he did not look good, he looked really old. But I'm going back to the Michael Moore fight in 1994, so we're looking, what, 27 years ago, he had a fight where he looked like he was about 60. And when I was watching it, two things jumped into my mind. And they're both along the same. I remember, this was before I really started watching a lot of boxing, but I remember they were talking about a fighter that was a championship fighter that came old overnight. And it was Johnny Bumpus. And Johnny Bumpus was never, the greatest. He was not a Hall of Famer, but he was a championship level fighter. And they were saying, like, near the end of his career, like they were basically like dragging him up the steps for a fight, and they said like the man could barely walk the steps, you know, and they said like I think it was one of his last fights, he got like knocked out in the first round, and they said like, it was like almost criminal if the man should have been there, and that kept going into my mind when I was watching this fight. The other thing I can remember, well, obviously none of us watched this one, but it was when Joe Louis, you know, even when he was champ, at 11-year title reign, and he was in the Army, and they said, like, whenever he would go to visit some of the troops, he would always want to, you know, put on an exhibition. And they said he was putting on so many exhibitions, there were sometimes it was like, the man was, you could tell, was exhausted. And his handlers were saying to him, Joe, you don't have to put on an exhibition every time you go to one of these. These guys are going to be happy just to see you. And he was like, no, I have to do whatever. And they were saying, like, you know, the man was like, even in the ring, as he was walking up those steps, and he was like laboring. And he was still in his prime. Those are the
Yeah,
things
but because Pat Watson, I believe he was 37, but that was considered old back then.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing a radio version of it. Lewis was old and out of shape. 37 now. I mean, that's good. It's concerned, but it's not put out the pasture like it was then.
I totally forgot to do it, but I was gonna.
And then Evander said he
was gonna pipe in the.
Evander still wants to fight Tyson.
Yeah. I was gonna pipe in the theme, the part in the movie Coming to America where they're in the barber shop and they're like talking about how old Lewis was. He was 72 years old. That's probably what people were saying about Evander Holyfield. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of people were criticizing Vitor celebrating so much over the fact that he beat a guy that was 20 years older than him, basically.
Oh, that's over the top. I don't buy that. I mean, I don't think Vitor went excessive on it. I was kind of surprised. I think Vitor's back on the juice with the emotion he had toward Jake Paul.
Yeah.
That's kind of a, you know, I mean,
I don't know. I really
celebrating, and like I said, it's.
I really didn't like the way it ended. Like the way that it kind of acted. They acted like it was a circus towards the end, and they're throwing around these $1 million figures, trying to get Jake Paul interested. It just made them look very desperate to me. Like they realized how bad and how much of it failed.
And, you know, maybe the next match could be Tito against Holyfield.
Well, the interesting thing is we found out that Holyfield was actually still going to fight McBride, but McBride was the one that had concerns. Triller people did not want him to fight, oddly enough, but they did want Holyfield to still fight. So it's just very weird circumstance. They didn't explain what it was, but it's something to do with his, you know, mental capacity, I think. You know, maybe starting to show signs of, you know, pugilistic dementia or something. I don't know, but yeah, that was kind of an interesting sidelight. And also, Donald Trump doing the commentating was pretty good. He, you know, is very proud of all the people in the audience being from Florida, you know, cheering him on and stuff, holding up signs. And his son actually had a confession about smoking cigarettes, getting caught smoking cigarettes and having to run wind sprints and for hockey practice or whatever, because the coach caught him. And that was probably the most interesting part of his commentary, because he was like actually kind of annoying. Like he kept piping up stuff that was just like basic, you know. And Trump actually had a very good knowledge of the fights, you know, because he's seen a lot of them. He's promoted a lot of them, or at least, you know, held them at his venues.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting parts was when they were talking about the crossover fights, and he mentioned Randy Couture fighting that guy, and then nobody could figure out who it was, and then like 5 minutes later somebody was like, oh, James Lights Out Tony. But then they had a couple fighters come up. Junior Dos Santos first, and then Gamebred, Jorge Masvidal there.
Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah.
Masvidal.
Yeah, it was great when they showed up because, I mean, those were his boys. And it was just like they were all friends. But I found it was kind of like interesting that the guy that they actually set up in the beginning to do the commentary, like, just left and never came back. Because Trump did get a little bit political right before it happened. And then the guy never came back. The other guy did. The guy on the far left, after the fighters, I guess Jorge went to go shake Evander Holyfield's hand or whatever. And so the other guy came back, but he only got like 2 words in edgewise after that. Because everybody was just chatting. And Trump knew a lot. And the fighters were surprised about how much knowledge he had. But the one guy they couldn't think of was Tim Sylvia. They were talking about trying to figure out who Ray Mercer knocked out in the MMA fight. And they ended up saying Tommy Morrison. Ray Mercer knocked out Tommy Morrison. So they switched. They literally did a crossover from MMA to boxing without explaining it. But yeah, he did knock him out in boxing, but not in the cage. But it was funny because they kept saying Tommy Morrison like they were talking about, MMA. Like he's more known for MMA. It was funny. But yeah.
Yeah, talk like Mercer did on Morrison, that could have been considered a ground and pound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. As far as Tito, I mean, Tito's whole thing in MMA was just, he was just a big, strong wrestler that knew how to get that weight advantage. He'd done some stand-up, but you could tell that, if you guys seen that, I'm sure you've seen the same thing I did. His punches were, the word I kept thinking was ponderous.
Yeah.
He was pushing his punches. Well,
he was so awkward in there. Like,
and
you could tell his foundation is as a wrestler.
He says, well, I don't move my head because in MMA you move your head, you turn into a kick. I never heard that said. But I mean, he was just awful stiff coming in. And Anderson his timing was perfect. And a lot of these idiots on the underground saying, the fight was fit. Action. Right? They don't know. I would bet people saying that have never fought and run into a perfectly timed punch like Anderson hit him with.
You know what I thought immediately after seeing that is Dana White needs to come out of the woodwork now and say, hey, how about that boxing match we talked about all those years ago? And we did a whole show on it, but never did. Let's do it now. Silva could be his coach. And they could do a whole Ultimate Fighter themed episode show on it now. It would be awesome. That's the fight I want to see next on Triller.
Yeah. Yeah. You think that wouldn't sell through the roof? Oh, wow. Yeah, that was...
I don't even care if it's fixed. I want to see that.
And then the question came up about Silva fighting Vitor. Well, they already fought in MMA. We don't need to see that. We want to see them against different competition.
Oh, how about...
We want to see them against pro boxers.
How about Canelo? How about that call out? You think that was called for?
Yeah. No.
You don't want to see him fight Canelo?
Canelo right now, Canelo is top of the food chain. That's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
But I'll tell you what, the Caleb Plant is really trying to build this up. He's really starting to pick up the trash talk and the confidence and everything. So I still stand by my prediction. His path to victory is very narrow.
I believe that.
But he's doing what he can.
The other controversy.
Really to fight like he's doing.
The other controversy on this card before we move on, there was a fight between David Haye and Joe Fournier, and it turns out that was not only an exhibition, but they were friends. And that was definitely, if not an understanding, hey, let's not knock each other out. It was like, obviously, the fix was in. Like, it was a sparring match, glorified sparring match. I mean, it was an exhibition anyway, so if it was fixed, it wouldn't matter. But yeah, it was a little bit ridiculous. And then David Haye coming out afterwards and he called Tyson Fury a fat dosser. And Brian Flores there was, or whatever his first name is, Mark Flores, I forget. But one of the announcers was a Flores, but I think it's B.J. Flores' brother. And he was like, "What did you call him?" He says, "He's a fat dosser." It's a British thing. Oh man, that was hilarious. And for your first fight out of retirement against your friend, to be calling people out like that, I mean, slow your roll, man. Slow your roll.
Well, Rich, we got to get you in shape for the Riddick Bowe thing coming up.
Yeah, I'll fight him on Triller. And then I'll fight Evander after that.
You and him. He called you out.
Yeah, right.
He said Riddick Bowe called you out.
Yep.
So you got to accept that, Tony. We got to get Rich in shape.
Okay.
Well, I'm already in better shape than Riddick.
Hey, why not, Rich? It would be a good payday.
Yeah.
It would be a good payday for you, buddy.
I'll just kick him in the legs a bunch of times.
So, and I'm sure I said this a few weeks ago, and I know I was talking to my dad about it. Not that long ago, I was watching, there was a thing on YouTube, and it was different, like, crazy things that happened in boxing matches. And one of them was before Bowe was champ, when he was fighting on Tuesday Night Fights against a guy named Elijah Tillery. And Tillery, you could tell, was just one of those mouthy, trash-talking kind of guys. And, Bowe was never one to shy away from, giving it back either. And the fight's going on Bowe, first round, obviously, knocking the floor with this guy. He knocks him down with about 10 seconds to go. Tillery gets up, Bowe throws 2 or 3 more punches. They start having words. One of them blows a kiss at the other one. Bowe throws a punch. Tillery starts trying to kick him. And then Rock Newman, the most, subtle human being in the world, jumps on the apron. Remember this fight? He's looking at it was a WWF match. He grabs the guy's throat, pulls him back over the rope. Bowe lands a right hand. They both go tumbling over the top. Remember that? Remember that? I remember, and they were like, I said, and I still contend this to this day. The fight would be, especially in their primes, would be one-sided. But the press conference would have been ecstatic. And that would have been Riddick Bowe and John Ruiz. And the pure entertainment value would have been Rock Newman and Norman Stone. Because that would have done that. Norman was so despised. I was watching the fight not that long ago. I came up on YouTube that suggested watch, and I had forgotten about it. It was around 2005-ish, and it was John Ruiz versus Andrew Galata, who was still somehow relevant around that time. And they're fighting, and Galata scores a knockdown early. And I forget if the fight ended up being a draw or Ruiz won the decision. But Norman Stone is a shit bit in the corner. And then he somehow gets thrown out. And he gets banished back to the locker. It looked like...
I remember that.
Yeah, it's something that happened in a pro wrestling match where the manager interferes and they banish him back to the dressing room. Reminded me of it, and he goes over to Don King and he's being escorted. I'm suing him, I'm suing that referee, I'm suing this guy, and he's flipping out. And then, like I said, a few months later, or a year later, Ruiz is then fighting Roy Jones. And you feel bad for a guy like John Ruiz, because, his name was perfect. He was a quiet man. He never said much, never embroiled in any controversy. And then you get a guy like Norman Stone who just can't shut the hell up. And when Ruiz was going to fight Roy Jones, a press conference fight broke out. Jones' trainer, Alton Murkerson, and Norman Stone. And Murkerson dropped him. And I remember even, like, the Ring magazine was like, Stone unconscious on the ground, saying, normally when a person's on the ground unconscious and in need of medical assistance, that's not something to laugh But this is Norman Stone, so it's like, we don't give a shit. But imagine that.
Yeah.
We're Robert Newman and Norman Stone.
That would, because, you know, you want to be emotional about your fire. I understand the bond, but you got to control it or it just winds up hurting your guy. I mean,
Yeah.
Stone, yeah, he was,
Norman Stone made Lou Duva look like a mute.
yeah, and, you know, people would joke with me and say, you know, about those Vietnam vets, you know, you guys can't control their emotions. Oh, man. Yeah, that was quite a partnership. Well, what's happened to Norman Stone? Did anyone ever hear about him now, or is he irrelevant? One and done.
Well, I guess the only guy that he had, really, of any significance, was John Ruiz. I'm Googling him right now.
Yeah, that happens. Like with Kelly Pavlik's manager. Never heard much about him. Yeah, never heard much about him either. You know, I guess they were kind of a one and done. You know, I often think about that.
Well, we know what happened to a few UFC fighters this week. I don't know if they were more inspired by the September 11th coverage. Maybe they were like, oh, I got better things to do. Or watching Holyfield get his ass kicked at 58. But Luke Sanders was one of the younger guys. Just had 8 fights in the UFC. He was released from the organization in May, had a couple losses on his way out. But started his career pretty well, 11-0. Went into the UFC and won a little bit before he started losing. Renan Barao was probably his biggest win by knockout. And then we had a couple other ones. Carlos Condit. I know I talked about this in one of his last fights. I said, you know, this is getting close for him. He's been doing this a long time. He's been in a lot of wars. So he's obviously pulled the trigger now. 32-14. His final record from welterweight champ. Will be an intro. Competed twice in 2021. He won a decision over Matt Brown and then lost on the scorecards to Max Griffin. His final one. Absolute legend. You know, his nickname was great, the Natural Born Killer. He was fierce in his heyday. He's kind of lost a step in his later days.
Yeah, I don't think he was ever the same after that Lawler fight. And I think he should have got the nod. Of course, he was always one of my favorite fighters, but that was a close fight, and it just seemed to take off. And who could blame him? I mean, what a war that fight was. And hate to see him go, but it's definitely time. I mean, it was kind of painful watching him. Multiple efforts. It just wasn't there.
And the 37-year-old Joseph Benavidez is the third fighter from UFC to walk away. And he took himself out of the drug testing pool, exits the sport with a 28-8 career mark, including 4 attempts at the belt, flyweight.
Yeah, he was like the Buffalo Bills FC. You know, more chances. Once you got it.
And his quote was, I still knew I could compete in the top 5. I could beat guys in the top 5, top 10 easy, but one of the main things is a lot of these guys that are coming up are killers. Or I see them, it's their UFC debut, and they take pictures with me in the back and say, I've looked up to you for so long. I used to get off school and watch you in WEC with my dad. I look up to you. It's like, I don't want to fight these guys next, these killers. I don't want to beat them up or have them beat me up. There was no more fights that were going to be fun. So, you know, I can imagine that's like the, the guy that is the ladies' man, and he's like in his 40s at the bar, and some 18-year-old hits on him. He's like, oh, geez, this is not fun anymore. That could be my niece, you know. That's crazy.
Right, and you know, I respect him. You need to know when to say when.
Yeah. So he's out, and last appeared at UFC 259 in March. Dropped a 3-round verdict to flyweight contender Askarov. Speaking of killers. And Prior to that, lost to Davison Figueiredo, who's now going to have a trilogy against Brandon Moreno. Which is, it doesn't make much sense to me since one guy won the first two. Anyway, we have UFC Fight Night Smith versus Spann coming up. Bellator 266 as well. Actually got some boxing matches we're going to talk about first. Actually, BoxRec this week tells us there's not a single boxing match that's important on Saturday. Enough to put it on the front page anyway. But we have some Friday night fights and we're going to find some Saturday night fights. And we're actually starting off this week with the mismatch of the week, which also happens to be
Saturday would have been the Ella fight, so it got postponed. That would have been this weekend.
Yeah. So that maybe makes sense. Well, anyway, in the United Kingdom, we have the mismatch of the week, starting us off at welterweight, and it's actually the main event as well of this card. We got welterweights James Flint, who is 8-0-1, fighting none other than the Fonz. Fonz is his first name.
Oh no. That's not fun.
Fonz Alexander, his record, get ready for this, 7 wins, 111 losses, and 0 draws.
Wow.
0.
Wow. Got those 7 wins though.
7 wins. I feel bad for those 7 people. I have to look them up just because I'm wondering who the hell this could be. And there's really nothing else spectacular on this card at all. But yeah, I thought I'd mention that. And then we go right to Tony's neck of the woods, the 2300 Arena, for a main event between Samuel Taya, 17-4-1, and Larry Friars, who is 11-4. And then we got some guy, Mike Guy, 12-6-1, fighting Jesse Hart, who is 26-3.
Yep. I knew Jesse this week, and unfortunately I can't break it down. I got shit going on all weekend, and then again next weekend. 2300. I had a fight that had a card last week that I'm going to discuss in a few minutes. It's good to see Jess back. He actually showed on Facebook his trunks, which are Philly steam. Like, damn, if I could go, I'd talk to him about walking into the ring. How cool would that be, right? But, Jesse had that. He had a couple of those losses when he challenged the super middleweight title, and then he wanted to avenge Bernard Hopkins' loss to Joe Smith, and he did not look good, not at all. And it was to the point people were like, "Kid, are you maybe done? Do you maybe not have it?" And we want to see how he's refocused himself. Has he made the changes necessary to, combat guys that really bring the heat to him, like Smith did? So we'll see. Hey, 30,000 miles starts with first step, and this is his first step back.
So stuff here.
And we discussed the 2300 Arena. Last week I didn't make it down to the fight. Friday, originally I was trying to discuss something for my birthday weekend. A lot of my friends had plans, so I was like, I made a
Happy 70th birthday, by the way.
What?
Oh, shit.
Thank you. I appreciate it. 26 again. I tried. So I was going to go to the Phillies game. Hadn't bought the tickets, but I'll buy them until I get down there. And my one friend goes, "No." He goes, "If you're free, I'm doing a group outing at the minor league stadium about an hour from my house that I've gone to." He goes, "I would love to have you come there and just kind of pop in and just see all my coworkers and photos with them." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do that. That sounds cool." So I was telling another friend the night before. I said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go up to Reading tomorrow night and this company outing." And the girl goes, "Oh, what time is the game?" I'm like, "I think it's 7, but let me check." oh, all the games this weekend are canceled. The other team had a COVID outbreak. I said, well, I guess I'm going to Philly then. So I head down, I had the day off, I went down to Philly, stopped in the one bar, where one of my buddies pops in, and he's a promotional manager for girls, you know? And he goes, yeah, he goes, I got girls working tonight at 2300. Well, that's cool. He's like, yeah, I'm headed over there now. And the fight was Christian Cardo's return. Christian, if you remember, had that real bad knockout loss a couple years ago. I think he was 17-0 or 18-0 going into the fight. And he'd taken that next logical step up and become a world title challenger. And he got caught in the second round. And he went, when I say he went down hard, he went down hard. And he was motionless for a matter of minutes. They ended up taking him out on the stretcher. And when he was even the promoter, Russell Peltz, was he shouldn't be in a gym or a ring for 4 to 6 months to let him get his confidence back. So he was supposed to fight that August. Whole card got canceled. Then he was going to fight last March. COVID happened. He had health set up, and some other bullshit happened. Another fucking COVID bullshit, right? So now he finally gets the chance to fight, and he wins. Yeah. But I got to bust his balls. I text her, I messaged him, I say, hey, Christian, congratulations on the win, but my boy had some of the girls doing the ring card girl work. Let the girls get in the ring. You had to knock the guy out in the first round. Jesus Christ, the girls want to work too.
I'm just looking at this guy's record with 111 losses and 7 wins, right? And he's actually got a few knockout wins too. Most of the guys in their debut, but one guy who was 4-0, he knocked him out. How about that? The last guy he won against was an Irish guy too, but I guess he wasn't a lucky Irish. But anyway, we got some other fights to talk about. Fights in Mexico here. Before I forget, I also wanted to talk about that Andy Vences and Jono Carroll fight on the Holyfield undercard there. We didn't really talk much about that, except to say it was a little bit of a controversial decision. Now, that was another point where Donald Trump was like starting to sound a little bit smart, but they were actually like foreshadowing what was going to happen. Because they were all saying, all the fighters up on the panel were saying, listen, this guy's losing, you know, he really needs to start acting desperate. And then the last 2 or 3 rounds, Jono Carroll comes out trying to win and trying to go for the knockout. And Andy Vences has been fighting a pretty technical fight, you know, scoring a lot of points. And Trump actually said it out loud. He's like, you know, these rounds should count more towards the decision because he's very aggressive. Donald Jr.'s like, yeah, they should change the rules to make that happen. It's just being annoying. And so then the fight ends, and it's a split decision win for Carroll. And I don't think anybody expected that. And they got into the worst decisions that anybody's ever seen.
You've gotten them over the years.
Yeah. So anyway, we have some other fights this Saturday. Here's one from Russia. We have Ike Shakhnazarian. He is 25-4, fighting Avak Uzlayan, who is 5-0. It's for the Russia lightweight title. And it's pretty much the best thing on that card. And we go down to Madrid, Spain. Another mismatch. Another guy with only 7 wins. And in Arthif Daniel, he is 19-3, fighting Reynaldo Mora, who is 7 wins, 57 losses, and 2 draws. He's a 757. Jesus fight. It was versus TBA, so I guess that's the problem. TBA. Over in the UK, here's one for a couple titles. Exchanged, possibly. Quite a big card. Come on, stop it. 20 seconds. So we got Tommy Frank, flyweight. He is 13-2, fighting Matt Windle, who's 6-3, for the vacant British flyweight title. And then Kash Ali, the heavyweight, 19-1, fighting Roman Gorst, who is 7-1 for the IBF European heavyweight title. Spectacular stuff on the rest of that card. Bakersfield, California. So the Day Jesus, Ray John Chance. Sorry, somebody's always got to go fight so far the week. Ray John Chance at featherweight. He's 5-0, going against Elon Day Jesus, who is 3-0. Like Elon Musk, spelled exactly the same way, but he's a Day Jesus. He's a technical Jesus. And that's not even the main event. The main event is, this is actually going to be on Fox TV too. Main event is Jose Valenzuela, 9-0, fighting Daner Berrio, who is 22-3-1. And then we got some Velasquez on Velasquez crime going on in Tampa, Florida. We got Tony Velasquez, he's 9-0, fighting Carlos Winston Velasquez, who's 27-38-2. Maybe they're not brothers. Possibly cousins. And we got Iron Alvarez. How's that for a name? I wonder if he's related to Canelo, because he's 12-0 at lightweight. Iron Alvarez fighting Pablo Capul, who is 10-34. Mismatches on this card. Boy. Undefeated versus been beaten a lot. Luis Gerardo Caraballo Ramos. It's one of those rare situations where a guy's got 4 Spanish names and one of them's not Jesus. He is 2-0-1. He's fighting William Lorenzo, who is 3-32. Mismatch City. And then another one in Pennsylvania. TBA is saying Matt Conway, 19-2. I know we put a press release out on this one. He's in the main event, fighting TBA. Keontae Irving in the co-main event. Looks like a tune-up fight for him. He's 9-0, fighting Antonio Luis Hernandez. He is 5-11-1. Hernandez. And then we got probably a relative of Matt, Mike Conway. He is 3-2-1, fighting Joshua Zimmerman, who is 0-3. And one Velasquez is fighting. Big fights this week. Juan Antonio Velasquez, 7-1, fighting in Galveston, Texas, against Julio Sanchez, who's 5-5 for the vacant USA Texas State lightweight title. Sean McCallman, 8-0, fighting Jamie Barboza, 21-18. So that's about it for this week on the boxing. A couple of MMA fights to talk about. We had no MMA last week. None. Whatsoever. So much so that 3 fighters retired. They had a little bit of time to think about it. Anyway, we have UFC Fight Night 192 coming up on Saturday in Las Vegas. And Anthony Smith in the main event against Ryan Spann. Anthony is 35 and 16. He's got a Carlos Condit record there. Fighting Ryan Spann, 19 and 6. And I don't really know what to expect. These are both very tall, lanky guys, and it's capable of losing. Anthony also has, obviously has a little bit more losses, but he's done pretty well for himself so far in the UFC. Ryan Spann hasn't been in a lot of big fights like Anthony Smith has been in, but he's got a heck of a lot of talent. So I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up one for me. I'm going to say I don't know enough about either guy to make a pick on him. We got Ion Cutelaba in the co-main event. He is 15 and 6 with one draw, fighting Devin Clark, who's 12 and 5. That's a great matchup on paper anyway. See how that goes. Female fight in the main event, main card. Ariane Lipsky, 13 and 7, fighting Mandy Bone, who is 7 and 0. 7 wins. Lipsky, I believe, has been in the UFC for a little bit, so I have the experience of the big show league that Mandy does not have. Then we have Armin Sarukian, who is 16 and 2, fighting Christos Giagos, who's 19 and 8. Nathan Vaness, 13 and 1, fighting Tony Gravely, who's 21 and 6. Joaquin Buckley, 12 and 4, had a great knockout in his first fight, but then got knocked out pretty much the same way in his next fight. Unreal, but Buckley's going to look to put it back together here. He's 12 and 4, fighting Antonio Arroyo, who's 9 and 4. We got Mike Rodriguez, 11 and 6, fighting Tefon Chokwi, who's 5 and 1. Another female fight, Raquel Pennington, 11 and 8. Her girlfriend just fought, Tony's tiny tornado cousin, Tisha Torres.
That's right.
Raquel Pennington is going to be fighting next in that pair, and they're coaching each other too, so they always appear in each other's corner. That's kind of crazy. But 11 and 8 is Raquel's record. She's fighting Pani Kianzad, who's 15 and 5, so it's a great matchup on paper. Should be a barn burner. We got Zhu Rong, who is 17 and 4, fighting Brandon Jenkins, who is 15 and 7. Then we got Montel Jackson, 10 and 2, fighting JP Buys. He does not sell, he buys. 9 and 3. It's JP Buys. Aaron Blanchfield, and another female fight. So female fights in this card. 6 and 1, fighting Sarah Alpar, who's 9 and 5. And third fight tonight, Impa Kasangane, 9 and 1, fighting Carlston Harris, who's 16 and 4. And we've got Gustavo Lopez, 12 and 6, fighting Haley Alateng, who is 14, 8 and 1. And the first fight of the night is another female fight, Emily Whitmire, 4 and 4, fighting Hannah Goldie, who is 5 and 2. Now this will be a tough one on FanDuel. We don't have any canceled fights here. So that's a lot of matchups to think about. We always know one female fight has to fit in somewhere. I figured that out from playing this FanDuel shit long enough. I don't think there's ever been a time where the female fight has not factored in somewhere. One of the female fights. In this case, we have 4 of them. So it's almost guaranteed. I got a little bit more free money to throw around on FanDuel, so hopefully this is the week for me. I won a little bit of money last week, but I lost some too. They ended up giving me $247 out of a class action lawsuit that I got hooked up in. They just sent me an email. I said, yeah, sure, I'll join. Signed a couple pieces of paper, and then both FanDuel and DraftKings were involved. So I had my DraftKings account closed years ago over some stupid dispute and never reopened it. I just always used FanDuel. So as part of the lawsuit, they gave the money, and I just logged in one day, and the money was there, but I couldn't use it. I wasn't verified or whatever. So I ended up getting my account opened back up. They never even asked about the dispute to get it closed in. And I got $57 to throw around on DraftKings. So, yeah. I was expecting like 12 cents. That's what you usually get from those class action lawsuits. Yeah, I haven't run out of my free money yet. I have $100 left. So we'll see how that goes this weekend. Anyway. So that's fight there. We go to Bellator for the last MMA fight this week. Got no PFL stuff going on until October. Yoel Romero, he is 13-5, fighting Phil Davis, 22-6 in the main event. It's a big one. The tournament format there, they're going to have a big light heavyweight showdown at the end. Neiman Gracie in the co-main event, 10-2, fighting Mark Lemminger, who's 12-3. Alejandra Lara against Deanna Bennett in a pretty decent female fight. Lara 9-4, Bennett is 10-7-1. We got Georgi Karakhanyan, 31-11-1. Wow. 43 fights. He's fighting Saul Rogers, who's 14-4. And how about this for a name situation? We've got Christian Edwards, who's 5-0, fighting Ben Parrish, who is 4-1. A couple of Catholic names there. Christian and Parrish. We got Grant Neal, 6-1, fighting Alex Polizzi, who's 8-1. Khalid Murtazalian, he is 15-2, fighting Anthony Adams, who is 8-2. There's a lot of O&O people in here. They're making their debuts on this one. No Sherdog pictures at all. We have another Gracie in the mix here. Raylon Gracie. He's 0-2. Heard of for a Gracie. It's unacceptable. He's fighting Shane Keith, who's 1-0. See how that goes. Anyway. That's about it for us. So, hidden stories here that I forgot about. Main boxing. That's about it. Wow. Not only is Gracie 0-2, he's 0-2 in Gracie events. He got knocked out in the first round.
Yeah, I noticed that.
At the Gracie Proving Ground event. And then before that, Team Gracie versus Team Hammerhouse. Lost by split decision to Dustin Beasley. Anyway. I guess that's it for us tonight. Until next week when we'll
All right, guys.
try to get Riddick Bowe on the show. And I'll challenge him again this time, since he challenged me.
That's good. That's the fun. All right.
All right. We'll get him in shape, Tom. We'll get him in shape.
That's our job, buddy.
All right. Have a good weekend, guys.
All right, adios.
Later.